For hundreds of years, Venice has been known as one of the most unique cities in the world. Millions of people fly from all corners of the globe to see this city built on hidden stilts, with good food, narrow canals, and men in stripes singing on fancy boats.
But you know you're not dreaming, senor.
But is this European gem at risk of becoming a modern-day Atlantis? You're about to find out. But first, let us give you some context. There was a time when what we now call Venice was nothing but a swampy area with shallow water, mud, and tall grass. It wasn't until the 5th century after Christ, during the collapse of the Roman Empire, that refugees fleeing invasions began to settle on these islands amongst the swamps. Europe was at the time in total chaos. The fall of Rome had shattered the order of the world. People living in Roman-built cities like Padova and Treviso migrated to this lagoon in search of safety. Once those first settlers found refuge, they started to make the impossible work. They learned to build on mud and water by driving wooden piles deep into the ground. A lot of work went into forming the canals we see today. The waterways within the lagoon were widened, straightened, and cleared of mud and weeds so boats could pass through. Smaller canals formed naturally between buildings. Over time, bridges connected them, and edges were filled to create water paths. Finding the right islands to live on was a game of trial and error. In time, the Rialto area, a cluster of islands closer to the open sea and firmer ground, became the hub of the main settlement. What began as a cluster of wooden huts was slowly turned into a real settlement, bridges, piers, and market squares. Rialto became the heart of Venice, the place where merchants, fishermen, and craftsmen gathered. Eventually, more and more land around these islands was reclaimed from the swamps. By 727 after Christ, they united under their first leader, the Doge, marking the birth of the Venetian Republic. While the rest of Europe was still recovering from Rome's fall, Venice was already steering its own course, an independent maritime power rising from the water. By the year 1200, Venice already had a recognizable city plan, built on two main islands divided by the Grand Canal, surrounded by smaller, scattered islets. By the year 1500 after Christ, the city had grown through reclamation and consolidation to include the Arsenale area to the northeast and the Giudecca Sestriere to the south. In the next 2 centuries, churches and palaces were built and decorated in a typical Venetian classicism, which owes a lot to the famous architect Andrea Palladio. Unlike other medieval cities that grew by conquering land, Venice grew by controlling trade. At its peak in the 15th century, the Republic of Venice ruled a vast maritime and territorial empire. On the terra firma, the Republic had expanded to include a number of major towns in what today are the Veneto and Friuli regions of Italy. Beyond the lagoon, the maritime domains included Istria, the Dalmatian coasts, parts of Montenegro, islands in the Ionian and Aegean seas, such as Corfu, Crete, and Cyprus. The Republic of Venice also maintained numerous ports throughout the Mediterranean and the Near East. Trade is what made Venice rich and mighty. In the 18th century, when Venice fell under the rule of Napoleon Bonaparte, the need for transformation was already being felt. Napoleon wanted to modernize Venice's medieval street pattern, creating wider streets and open public spaces. Via Garibaldi near the Arsenale was built artificially by filling in canals to create a straight, wide thoroughfare. The new street soon attracted shops, cafes, and local housing. Some decades later, when Venice came under Austrian rule, another straight pedestrian street was built in the Cannaregio Sestriere. It was inaugurated in 1871 after the unification of Italy and named Strada Vittorio Emanuele II. Other similar streets were built across Venice, such as Riva degli Schiavoni or the Fondamenta Nuove near St. Mark's Square. Another major transformation in Venice's urban landscape was Piazzale Roma, the city's main entrance today. Until the 1800s, the area where Piazzale Roma stands was marshy, occupied by a convent, gardens, canals, and warehouses. In 1846, the Ponte della Libertà, a railway bridge connected Venice to the terraferma, was built. Piazzale Roma became the logical arrival port. At the end of that bridge, the land was cleared, canals filled, and monastic buildings demolished. The Santa Lucia railway station was built next to it. The new square was linked to the rest of the city by bridges, first by Ponte delle Guglie and later by the Calatrava Bridge. In 1933, the Mussolini government built a road bridge alongside the railway bridge, allowing cars to enter the city as far as Piazzale Roma. Parking garages, a parts terminus, and a people mover were added, turning the area into a multimodal hub, connecting cars, buses, taxis, and trams from the mainland to the boats within Venice. These modernization efforts helped Venice keep up with the rest of the world till after the Second World War. On the other hand, with advanced transportation, Venice started experiencing a tourism boom. An airport, San Nicolo Airport, had been built in the 1920s at the northern tip of the Lido. Its narrow position limited expansion and safety. By the 1950s, modern jet aircraft required longer, stronger runways. So a new airport, Marco Polo, located on the mainland at Tessera, was opened in 1960 for commercial traffic. Passenger numbers grew rapidly, and today the airport handles over 10 million passengers annually and ranks amongst the top 5 airports in Italy. The location of Marco Polo at the edge of the Venetian lagoon allows passengers to arrive and depart by water, keeping the travel experience uniquely Venetian. Water taxis and public boats connect the terminal directly with St. Mark's Square, Murano, and the Lido. Public infrastructure were one way to keep the city vibrant. Another was to reclaim the city's cultural relevance with world-renowned events. The Venice Art Biennale and the Venice Film Festival became symbols of that renewal. The first Biennale opened in April 1895, during the era of grand international expositions like the Paris World Fair. Over time, it expanded to include architecture, cinema, music, theatre, and dance. The Art and Architecture Biennale has helped in the renovation of the Arsenale area and various other palazzi scattered around the city. The Venice Film Festival, founded in 1932 as an offshoot of the Art Biennale, was created to celebrate cinema as an art form, not just entertainment, and to attract visitors during the summer tourist season. It was the first international film festival in the world, preceding Cannes and Berlin. Today, the festival supports emerging filmmakers and promotes gender equality, climate awareness, and new media. Yet the challenges to the survival of the city remain. In the early 1900s, more than 160,000 people lived in the historic city. By 1950s, that number reached its peak, around 175,000. And then the decline began. Families started leaving the lagoon for the mainland, to towns such as Mestre and Marghera, where homes were cheaper and life was easier. By 1980, the population had dropped to around 120,000. By the early 2000s, just 60,000 remained. Today, only about 50,000 people still live in the heart of Venice. The city that once ruled the sea is now losing the very thing that made it alive, its people. But here's where the city's life is really at stake. Venice isn't just losing its people, it's losing ground. The city is sinking, slowly, quietly, by about 1 or 2 millimeters per year. It doesn't sound like much, but over a century that amounts to about 10 centimeters. And when you add rising sea levels, the effect could be devastating. But why does Venice face this risk while other islands don't? When the first settlers made the islands in the lagoon, they didn't find solid ground waiting for them. They found swamps, mud, and saltwater marshes, land that was never meant to hold a city. The Venetians built their homes on millions of wooden piles, driven deep into the mud until they reached layers of firmer clay. On top of these piles, they built wooden platforms, and above them, the stone and brick palaces that would one day define the sky. Nobody back then could have imagined that this cluster of huts would grow into one of the greatest cities in the world. The system they built was ingenious, but it wasn't made to carry the weight for centuries. The same thing that made Venice possible is now making it fragile. The land beneath it is slowly compressing under the weight of everything built above it, and the water around it is rising. Despite all this, Venice has shown a kind of resilience one doesn't often see. It's constantly adapting. Entire homes turned into guest houses, workshops into shops, streets reshaped by the pull of tourism and survival. Beyond the lagoon, the Veneto region remains one of Italy's most vital economic engines, home to industries in Mestre and Marghera, and global fashion names. The port of Marghera, directly opposite Venice's historic islands, was built to give the city a deep-water port, capable of handling large ships. It was paired with a vast industrial zone, refineries, shipyards, and chemical plants, transforming Mestre from a rural area into one of Italy's largest industrial hubs. This made Venice less dependent on maritime trade and tourism, but at a cost. The petrochemical industries caused significant pollution and ecological damage. Today, major efforts are underway to transition toward cleaner industry and sustainable logistics. Tourism still plays a massive role. About 1 in every 5 visitors to Italy comes to Venice. But what's really holding up Venice today? One project, known as Mosè, named after Moses, the man drawn out of the water, aims to save Venice from periodic flooding, which the Venetians called acqua alta. It's one of the most ambitious engineering systems ever attempted. 78 mobile floodgates that rise from the sea and temporarily close off the lagoon from the Adriatic whenever tides get dangerously high. Construction began in 2003, and after years of setbacks, debates and controversy, including corruption scandals and environmental concerns, the system finally became operational. Of course, Moses has had its critics. Some worry it could disturb the lagoon's delicate ecosystem, its current and its soil balance. Mosè may not be perfect, but it represents something Venice has always done well: adapt. Other engineers and hydrologists are also discussing how to stop Venice from sinking. It's calculated that the city sinks 1 to 2 millimeters per year, and some have proposed reinflating the land underneath the lagoon by drilling wells and pumping water beneath the deep geological layers under Venice. A pilot attempt was tested near Marghera, and the results were promising. Currently, the reinflation idea remains in research, while the Venice Water Authority has its main focus on the Mosè barriers, lagoon sediment management, and environmental restoration, keeping subsurface reinflation as a long-term possibility. The story of Venice isn't simply about survival. It's about transformation. So to answer the million-dollar question, is Venice dying? Culturally and economically, it definitely is not. Yes, it is sinking. Yes, it is losing locals, and yes, it's battling forces far bigger than itself. But at the same time, it's fighting back, adapting, rebuilding, and transforming, just as it has for over 1,000 years. It does not want to be merely a romantic fairy tale city for tourists to take selfies. It's a living, breathing space that's been fighting to stay above water, literally, for over 1,000 years. Venice is proof that beauty and fragility can coexist, that a city can have a rich past but still be transformed today to remain relevant and inspirational for all.